Welcome to Friday Night Date Night with Sportsman Channel. I'm Scott Leysath. I host a couple of shows on Sportsman Channel. I've got The Sporting Chef and The Dead Meat Show. But tonight I'm here to get together with you all, invade your kitchen, and show you how to throw together a good meal with some of the stuff that you have at home. Now, fortunately, for those of us who hunt and fish, we usually have well-stocked freezers, at least if we're successful out there. You may not know just what you have in the freezer. If you do look around, you'll find that there's some really good stuff there. And if you have to depend on the store, you may just come home with a hunk of bologna. And as much as I like a fried bologna sandwich with flappy cheese, as my son used to call it, on white bread and yellow mustard, I think we can do better. Tonight, I'm going to make a Guinness stew. If you're looking for a real recipe on this, go to sportingchef.com and look for the Guinness oven stew recipe. Now, this won't be exactly what's on the recipe page itself because I had to make do with what I had on hand. Didn't go to the store, got some stuff out of the refrigerator and the freezer. So first thing I want to do though, since it is date night, I'm going to have a little wine. And I suggest you do the same because whether it's wine or some kind of liquor drink, I found that my food always tastes better with alcohol. For the Guinness oven stew, it's going to be, Guinness has a very pronounced flavor. It's kind of a chocolatey, stout beer, but I didn't have any. But what I did find was some Young's Double Chocolate Stout. I didn't buy that. I'm pretty sure my son bought it and he didn't know that it was here or it would have been gone by now. So I'm going to use that as going to be my Guinness. First thing I want to do is make a roux. If you don't know what a roux is, it's basically butter and flour or some kind of fat and flour. That's a thickener. It also gives it flavor. If you're making a gumbo, that's what you build the gumbo on. I've got some melted butter in here. I'm going to take an equal part of flour and I'm just going to whisk that into the butter. By cooking it, it cooks that flour taste out of it. I'm going to add a little bit more flour. If you burn your roux, you have to start over because otherwise everything else will taste burnt. So, just about done here. Because I don't want to make a big mess. I want to just use the one pot. So I've got my roux done here. And it's okay if there's a little bit of that roux in there. When I start the dish, a little olive oil. I'm going to crank up the heat. I've got venison. This is venison top round. I've got some duck breasts right here. This is duck and goose breast. And then I found some, this is smoked bison flank that's been sliced up. Get the duck breasts in there. And I'm going to get the venison in there and I'm going to season it with some of my High Mountain venison rub. And give that a stir. I just want this meat to be browned. Now I want to add a little bit more oil. And that is olive oil. You can use vegetable oil. I don't care. Whatever you still have left over in the pantry, use that. I've got onions. I did happen to have an onion. I always have onions. In my downstairs refrigerator, I always have onion, celery, carrot. There's carrot. Although, you know, when I say I always have celery, I didn't have any celery. But I did have one sweet potato. So going off the recipe from the website, I've got onion, carrot, sweet potato. I'm going to put some garlic in there. And I also, you know, it calls for potato, but I didn't have any potato, but I did happen to have some canned potatoes. So maybe you've got canned potatoes. Maybe if you wanted to make this, if you didn't have potatoes, if you wanted to make it with rice, if you wanted to put some pasta in there at the end, just make sure. What I like to do with the pasta is I like to cook it al dente, cool it, get it really, really cool, and then just kind of throw it into the end because otherwise that pasta tends to disintegrate if you leave it in there too long. So right now, all I'm trying to do is put a little color on these vegetables. Then I'm going to add some liquid. All right, so the onions are a little translucent. Everything's starting to sweat a little bit. Now is the time when everybody takes a drink of whatever it is they're drinking. Now, okay, this recipe calls for bay leaves and let me see what else. Bay leaves, bittersweet chocolate, dried rosemary, dried thyme. I don't have any of those things. What I do have is some High Mountain Italian seasoning. And I'm going to add a little bit more of this venison rub here because this will season the vegetables that I just put in there. Let me give that a stir. Now, for the Guinness part. Not Guinness, but it's a stout chocolatey wine, and since the recipe called for bittersweet chocolate, I'm hoping this will fill the bill. I can always add more, but, you know, there's that. Let me give that a stir. Normally, I make my own game stock, but I've used it all up. All I have left is chicken broth, bone broth, but in a pinch, this kind of base works really good. What you don't want to use is a bouillon cube. Just say no to bouillon cubes. All that is just salty, dark-colored cubes. Make your own stock with the game that you bring home. If you're going to not do that, if you want to, if a recipe calls for beef base or whatever, or beef stock, I use this jarred product, and this is what a lot of restaurants use. This is a better product. Normally, you mix this with water. I'm going to do the whole thing, mix it all together right in the pot, and save a step. And even if you do happen to have game stock on hand, having some of this commercial beef broth, beef base, or chicken base, it really kind of helps you to stretch a recipe if you're a little short on broth. I've also got a little brown sugar and fresh rosemary. So let's say you don't have fresh rosemary, you don't have rosemary growing in the backyard. This stuff, once it gets going, it really, really takes off, and you can have it year-round in most places. So I just went out to the hillside here, got some fresh rosemary. If you're using dried herbs instead, just go easy on it. Add a little bit at a time. So I've got rosemary. I've got all that stock in there. I'm going to add my smoked bison flank. I'll add the potatoes later. Once it starts to reduce a little bit, I'm going to add that roux and thicken it up a little bit. But for now, I just want everything to get nice and tender. All right, so a couple hours later, and by now, if this is your date night, hopefully you've been working on that glass of wine or whatever it is you drink while this was doing its thing. If you cut your stuff into smaller pieces, obviously it'll take less time to get tender. If you want to speed things up, you could put it into an Instapot and make the same recipe. And as it heats up, this is going to thicken it. This is going to give it body. It's going to give it a whole different dimension of flavor because it's got that flour in there too. Flour and butter is going to add flavor. Oh my goodness, that thickened up instantly. That is beautiful. I'll thin it out with a little bit more of this double chocolate stout. One of my favorite beers I've never heard of. Again, the whole idea here is let's use up the inventory. Let's be a little bit creative on date night. Turn the heat off. When you weren't looking, I added some of these canned potatoes in there too. Oh my, this is a thick, hearty, stout soup. Again, if you're looking for a recipe similar to this, you can go to the sportingchef.com website. Catch my show on Sportsman Channel, catch The Sporting Chef and Dead Meat, and of course MOTV, My Outdoor TV, where you can get thousands of hours of outdoor programming from Outdoor Channel, Sportsman Channel, World Fishing Network. It's all there, MOTV, and don't forget to use Sporting Chef as your promo code, and you can check it out for 30 days while you're snuggling up to your loved one, having a little wine and Guinness wild game stew.